way, AI is almost just like a chat interface to the internet, a bit like how Google searches it. ChatGPT is how you talk to it. And so it's only going to be as powerful and as good as the internet as its collective whole. So every negative comment on Reddit, every negative comment on 4chan that formed part of the training and part of the machine learning data set that helped create these AI models, that's in its ethos and in its core. So in a way, we're dealing with like another iteration of the internet. And the internet is a spectrum from, smutty, terrible, awful hate speech all the way to intellectual enlightenment, things like Wikipedia and, all the good things that are part of society. So we've almost got this spectrum of information that humanity's produced in the last sort of 20, 30 years, and we've rolled that up and trained AIs on it. And so you can get a response anywhere in that spectrum, and the AI is going to try to give you the response that you want.
Dan Dawson, welcome to the Schoolyard Cast. How are you?
Good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, going along very well. Thank you for coming on. Now, as Chief Executive Officer of Schoolzine, you've acquired Sports Tracker, which is now being used by hundreds of schools. What can you tell me about that?
Look, it might not be immediately obvious to people why a website and a newsletter company would pick up something like Sports Tracker, which manages swimming carnivals, athletic carnivals. But ultimately, we picked it up because it's close to what we do, which is student achievement. So when I think student achievement, especially sporting achievement, casting my mind back to when I was at school and thinking about, athletics days, the fun, the joy, the colours, the camaraderie. That's a really powerful and emotive day. And we see that in our newsletters at Schoolzine, and we wanted to extend what we do into that area. So the opportunity came up to pick up Sports Tracker, and it was built by a PE teacher who is a lovely guy who's still involved, who still checks in with us to check how it's going. He grew it to 200 schools, and he said, I can't support it, can't quite develop it in the way that it needs to be done. I'm not a commercial software engineer, a commercial business person. I'm a PE teacher who saw a need and saw a problem and built something. So he handed the reins over to us, and we've quickly gotten tooled up on what it is to run a sports day and some of the challenges that PE teachers have. And now our support team are helping run carnivals, helping teachers on the big day record the results for all the students. So it's really exciting, and we're looking forward to developing it even further and growing it more in Australia.
And it's not uncommon, is it, Dan? Because you do hear stories of teachers and staff members of schools who have an idea, or they've got something that they've home brewed or made themselves that they use for the school, in this case athletics, and they perhaps lack the time or the ability to polish from like a technical sense and everything like that. So finding Schoolzine as essentially a software angel investor of a time and a great idea is a fantastic accomplishment, I would think.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, the best solutions are born out of solving those kinds of problems, and not everyone's got those toolkits to sort of build out the cybersecurity aspects of things. How do you scale to 1,000 users or 10,000 users? So they're challenges that they're growing pains that you need a certain skill set to face. But we see it all the time, and we've seen it, everything from science teachers build out elaborate spreadsheets with macros and things like that. And we've got all sorts of other amazing apparatus that we've come across. So it's inspiring to see teachers genuinely trying to get stuff done within their wheelhouse. So it's been a great experience so far.
Oh, fantastic. Well, Speaking of great experiences that are forthcoming, are you in a position to tell me more about the AI-powered project that you are building?
Yeah, I can probably tell you some of the details without being, too much of showing my cards to everyone. But
Understood. I
um,
appreciate it.
look, I think AI is something I'm heavily involved in, both with my technical background and then obviously the business applications of AI. I think at first glance, if someone looked at Schoolzine and looked at AI, they would think about generating content for newsletters and websites. But let's face it, that AI content is dribble, and I think that the content that is authentic is actually more powerful on websites and in newsletters. So we're not going to be applying AI to, do your newsletter for you automatically. We want that to come from you. And no doubt some of our users will hear this podcast. And I think our users are the best authors. So what we're working on is something a little bit different. It might not be immediately obvious. And that's a tool to help with accessibility and translation of newsletters. So AI is essentially a massive unlock. And the thing that it's unlocked is something that it's been in my background for many years. And it's a way to translate the English language or any language into a number of other languages and a number of other versions of languages that make newsletters more accessible to other people.
Magnificent.
But that's the start of the hint.
Yeah, and that's like a lofty goal, isn't it? And it's fantastic, and it's a well and truly a worthwhile one, because if members of a school, either be the teachers or staff of a school, are working very, very hard to produce a newsletter, you would hope that is going to be tools available to help basically transcend language to be able to make sure that that content reaches absolutely everyone that it needs to.
Yeah, that's right. And it's something we've been involved in for a long time. So we've had a Google Translate application inside our newsletter that automatically would change the font size if someone has low vision to make it easier and clearer, would translate to different languages. And we see a lot of different languages occur. The unlock that's happening for us is taking it from something that's best of breed at the moment. I think we're one of the few companies that really thinks about this and focuses on this inclusiveness for readers. And we're about to take it to a next level that's comparable to big budget corporates. And the way that we're doing this is essentially AI has given us something that's usually quite labor intensive for free. And so essentially, the way to imagine it is that if you publish a newsletter in English, let's say it's written by a teacher and an administrator, they're using vernacular and jargon at their level, and they're tertiary educated. They've got subject matter expertise jargon, like words like pedagogy, for an example. So what our tool is going to do is essentially take what they've written and let it exist in its pure form, but also create a simplified form which caters to a lot of low literacy people and low literacy readers. And if you think about the landscape of literacy, we've got 13% of Australian population who are at a low literacy, low reading level. We've got about 40% that read up to about an 8th or 9th grade level. And so if we're communicating about a student's education to, these adults who have low literacy levels, and we're using words like pedagogy, or we're using language that is inaccessible to these people, then we're already excluding them, and we're already creating a wall or a barrier, and we're probably unearthing a bit of school PTSD from when they were kids. So what this tool does is it simplifies the language to be more inclusive of those people that are at that lower literacy level, and gets them reading the newsletter in a simple way that sort of speaks to them and where they're at in their level, so that they can still be engaged in their in their kids' learning.
Yeah, absolutely. And no doubt, as deep as this talk will go, we'll be able to touch on more of the finer facts of what you just said there. But that is intensely interesting. With the emerging use of artificial intelligence as an example, it would be safe to say that your role as CEO really has you identifying trends to support the need of schools, wouldn't it?
Oh, 100%. Being a tech company and being oblivious to AI, I think it's almost a disservice to your business and to yourself and to your customers. I've always felt at Schoolzine, our customers are educators first and foremost, and they're busy educating. That is their business. They trust us to look to the horizon, to look at SEO trends, to look at accessibility trends, and now obviously AI trends are quite typical. We've been watching, I guess, very curiously, and that's how we found this opportunity. I think when you first glance at AI, it's easy to think about the content and the articles that it can produce. It's easy for your mind to go to students cheating using AI or getting wrong facts from AI, but and I think they're all really important issues that I think educators have to face.
That's right, because sorry to interrupt there, Dan, but you make a good point, because I think a lot of initial impressions of the use of AI, both from a student and a teaching point of view, is how can I use this to cut corners, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's the natural, and that's the value proposition we're sold, is that this machine is going, it's a magic box, and it's gonna cut all the boring bits of your life out and all the labor intensive bits of your life out. And it's got to be taken with a pinch of salt, because these AIs were trained on the internet. So we've known for a long time that the internet's not necessarily 100% factually correct. So it's been, from a get-go, it's been trained on the internet. And there'll be educators out there that are old enough to remember Google coming about and coming onto the main stage, and they've lived through students getting more and more access to information, and that means the right information and the wrong information. So I think now more than ever, curation of information is vital. And that's why we say with a newsletter, write authentic content. And we've got a saying, I've kind of started spruiking it around the office. It's that authentic is the new organic. So if you remember, everything became organic at the supermarket a few years ago.
That's right.
I think now people were sick of over manufacturing and all this stuff. I think now people are sick of consuming AI content. They're sick of weird typos in articles, and they just want the real deal. They want a human that sounds like a human talking, and not this over polished AI-ified stuff. So look, I think it's a really interesting time, and I think if I had to give any advice to people sort of navigating this, it's that you still are authentic as a human producing content, in whether you write it, whether you record videos, whether you take photos, you're still doing something that the AI can't quite achieve yet. And I think human readers, be it students, be it parents reading newsletters, I think they're going to gravitate to you. And it's not about how many volumes of things you can put on the internet with AI and how quickly you can do it. It's about, can you get your authentic, and authentic is the new organic, can you get that organic, authentic message out to people? And if you can do that, you're going to, I think, rise above a lot of the noise that AI is creating in a lot of industries.
And that's right. And at some point along the journey, you do have to give consumers of content a bit of credit, because with AI generated content that's done rushed or without too many prompting words or keywords or phrases or anything like that, you do run in sometimes to a trope like the uncanny valley. Like, it looks real, it reads real, but you can tell that something is a little bit off. And I know even in on Hollywood or something like that, there's been like a few attempts of AI generated movie posters and things like that. And I know just by like browsing the internet that AI in terms of image generation, it's getting less of it now, but can have an issue with generating extra fingers on a hand or something like that. And that's always quite amusing to see. But yeah, we do have to give credit to the consumers and the audience and everything like that to be able to have an instinct of like, no, this doesn't quite read or look as authentic.
Yeah, 100%. And I think people have gotten to that point now. I think um, humans are great at adapting, and our brains are great at adapting. And I think where we didn't pay attention before, like counting fingers, I think humans are sort of squinting and saying, "Hey, did a computer make this?" And I think that's something that, yeah, lends itself to this whole trend of organic being, the new way people consume media. But AI still has its place. And I mean, I would get it to check an email for me and ask that it's factually correct, not to write the email for me, because it's going to hallucinate things that I don't want to say. It's going to dig too far into details and things like that. So I think how we use it, if we approach it like a magic pill that first go, it's going to save 5 hours of work for me, then we're going to fall into pitfalls. But I think as people use it, if they learn how to use it the right way and learn about its limitations, it can have a great place in our toolkit. But it's not a magic pill, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, understood. Now, your career journey has been steeped in the development of information technology and communication solutions. That's very obvious, but that's not all, is it?
Oh no. Definitely on the business side, and definitely have had a focus on some humanitarian and accessibility and inclusive type ventures before coming to Schoolzine. So yeah, it's been interesting. Um, yeah, probably the one I talk about, and I think everyone should have I call it like a barbecue conversation starter. Like if someone asks you what you do or what you've done at a barbecue, how do you answer that result? How do you answer that question? And I think, yeah, for me, what gets people interested if I am chatting about it is my time working in Poland in response to the Ukraine being invaded. So that was at a previous organization. And again, like with Schoolzine, it was, educationally adjacent. And what we did was we set up a factory to essentially produce books in the native language for Ukrainian students who were displaced. And we put those books onto tablets, and then those tablets would go into military grade cases and be taken over. And they'd be able to be charged on power banks. That you'd just be able to put them all in the case and they'd all charge. So the kids could pull the tablets out, they'd be fully charged, and they can start reading books on the tablet. And from a tech perspective, it was amazing because we got to set up the operations to produce that. We were right next to an active war zone in the country next door, and it was quite an ominous feel from the people of Poland while I was there. A little bit nervous. Poland's obviously got an interesting history for the history buffs out there. So producing those tablets and getting them out there was important. And I think the takeaway from that wasn't so much the tech, and it wasn't so much the mechanism to how we got books in the hands of these kids who all of a sudden school stopped for them. So they could keep on reading. They could read books about trauma, and that helps them process it and all that sort of stuff. But I think beyond the tech, the take home was just how important inclusiveness and literacy actually is for a lot of people, and especially for kids. And it breaks cycles, and it basically empowers them, despite being disadvantaged, to continue reading, continue developing themselves, and all that sort of thing. So I learnt a lot, coming from tech, coming from all sorts of software engineering things, learning about literacy and humanitarian aid, and how to help students have outcomes, and how powerful that is. It really was a great experience. So
that's absolutely incredible. Like, I would have no doubt that your experiences there could easily have its own dedicated Schoolyard Cast. So I'm definitely going to have to put a pin in that, because that is intensely interesting, especially when it is essentially on a global scale and in that side. So that's incredible. Now, back to AI. Two big drivers for the use of AI under your leadership is translation and accessibility, as you highlighted earlier. Can you elaborate how this helps schools? Because I know that you were speaking from a newsletter perspective in terms of making sure that content is accessible to a wider range of people who would speak different languages within a school community. But there would be even more elements to that, wouldn't there?
yeah, 100%. And our goal is to essentially create a touch point between schools and parents, and all parents, not just 70% of parents, or 50% of parents, or parents who don't have a disability, or guardians who don't have a disability. Our ethos have always been inclusivity, and the reasons underpinning that, are essentially creating a touch point that isn't transactional. And I think the way that schools and parents interface can be quite transactional. It's like, we need a permission slip. We need you to, come in and buy this uniform, all these things. And those transactional elements are important. They need to happen, otherwise kids are going to come to school with no uniforms. That they're vital, but they can't be your only touch point. And I think this is where schools, if you compare, say, a school to a bank, my bank will just email me a statement every month, and then I'll go in if there's a problem, and that's it. So there isn't warmth, there isn't rapport. But schools operate in a very emotional situation and an emotional environment. People's kids are involved with schools. A kid having a bad day at school ripples through a family at an emotional level. So schools have a way lower budget than ANZ Bank or Commonwealth Bank, yet they have to have this level of touch point and I guess parent interaction that is even higher than some of the biggest corporates, that are already out there, and that's while they're busy educating, 800, 900 kids, or, however big the school is. So they have this tremendous pressure on them to, I guess, interact socially with the parents and have that extra touch point. And the newsletter is a great way to do that. And every school does it differently. Some have barbecues, some have open days, some have fates, some have different vehicles to make sure that they can talk to parents. But the newsletter is like this consistent drum of update, information, feel good, student achievements, celebrating success. And through all the chaos that happens in the school year, in the parents' life, in the students' life, with teachers, if that newsletter is going out at a really regular cadence and it's got all sorts of information, you've created a touch point between the school and the parents that isn't transactional. And so that means when it comes time to a tough conversation, or if someone's going to come in for a parent and teacher interview, that anxiety and that nervousness can dissipate a little bit, because school isn't this kind of anonymous place. If it's sending you, pictures of the grade threes doing finger painting and making awesome crafts, or someone breaking a school record in a 100-meter race. Those things are positive interactions that a parent and a school can have together. So we want to foster that, and we want to do it in a way that's accessible so that we get those people who maybe English is their fourth language, get them involved. Why should they miss out? Why should school be confusing and transactional for them, but warm for everyone else? So at our core, we want to sort of bring everyone into that inclusive family and create an environment where schools can just celebrate their community and not need a reason to talk to those parents and address those parents. And there's always going to be news and information and events, like that's part of it, that's school life. But the celebrating student achievement is at the core of it. And I think that the schools that do that with our newsletter product have a lot of success in a lot of different areas. So,
well said, Dan. And yeah, no, I'm sure that much, if not all, of what you have just outlined will resonate with not only those who prepare the content and hope that it reaches their entire school community, but even those who are absorbing it as parents and guardians themselves. So, well said, Dan. That's fantastic. As CEO, you collate feedback from schools and your own teams within Schoolzine. What other methods do you use to grow and maintain your relationships to schools?
Yeah, awesome question. We have a customer success team based here in Australia, and we have a bunch of processes in the business that let us basically take a score of how we're doing. The nature of IT is that stuff goes wrong, like people forget passwords, people forget how to do something, something's not quite working, there's frustration. I think that hasn't been fully solved yet. And no matter how much time you put into a product, you can't just throw it out there and hope people don't need help. It's good that people always have someone to call. So I guess the first point of call is that, with our free support and our free training as part of our offering, we're constantly getting calls and emails, and they range from I forgot my password to I've got this image, I need to work out how to blur a face. And, oftentimes the team are doing a bit of Photoshop that, we probably shouldn't do for free, but we do it for free anyway, because we love what we do and we like good looking newsletter headers. So we'll put a bit of Photoshop in. And so that team is essentially getting inbound calls. And we send out surveys afterwards, and that's how, as a CEO, I measure that we're doing the right thing. And I check for trends as well and make sure that, alongside my leadership team, that, we're not solving the same problem over and over again if there's a way we can solve it with software development. And I guess that's how we make the decision, what's a one-off user error to solve here, and what's a feature that's in demand or something that can make life easier. The other side of things is that we proactively reach out to our customers, and we've got a lot of data and I guess intelligence in the business that helps us understand if, say, someone stops sending out a newsletter. That's a prompt for us to call a school, and that's an outbound thing. I think that's one of the key things that makes us different to, say, like an off-the-shelf $29 a month, American-based platform, is that we actually care if you use the tool or not, and that we'll call you to sort of work out what's going on. So often we call a school and, Jan, she was the one who did the newsletter. She's just gone on maternity leave for 9 months. She gave me a 10-minute handover, and I went to go do the newsletter, but I didn't do it. I ran out of time, and then it's like, hey, well, come and do a free training. Like, let's get you up to speed and get that newsletter out there. And that's important to us as a measure of success, is getting those newsletters in the hands of parents, because it's at the core of what we want to do, which is build community and celebrate that student achievement. So we've got a bit of a push and pull where some people come to us and sometimes we go out to our schools to, give them support and help them proactively.
And you raise an important point there too, Dan, in my eyes, because inside a school, if you're looking at either succession planning or, as you highlighted for an example, maternity leave or anything like that, somebody moving on, there are so many structures, not even just newsletters, which are beholden by a person who may have held a role for 5 to 10, 15 years, and they have their own curated, customized way of doing things. So if we were using newsletters as an example, they may have a publisher template that they've had for 5 or 10 years, and having that thrust upon someone else with only a couple of, if you're lucky, A4 pieces of paper which have instructions that are no longer perhaps up to date because of version changes and things like that. It's a totally different contrast to, say, Schoolzine as an online module-based newsletter builder, where you're able to access support content in a library that is already available to you. It's easy to contact the customer support team, and you're able to get answers and basically have the rubber hit the road for a brand new person to be able to get that content out there to a school community.
Oh, 100%. And yeah, that's just the reality of a school. I mean, in a large corporate, and if you go to business school, they'll tell you about key person risk, and they'll say that it's a bad idea to have one person responsible for one critical piece of your school or your organization. The fact is that, as I said before, schools' primary objective is educating. We know that because we've been servicing schools for so many years, and we know that educators are busy doing what, serving the purpose of the school. They're not there to make profit for shareholders. So we understand that they need that extra bit of support, and they need us almost like a managed service provider. And we often refer to ourselves as a term called SaaS, which is software as a service. We refer to ourselves as software with a service. I won't try and say the SWAS or whatever the acronym might be. So it's that one hasn't caught on as much, but it's if you're in Australia working with schools and you don't have someone that they can call, and if you don't respect how busy educators are, they don't need to know or shouldn't have to know about SEO on their website, or they shouldn't have to be up to date with the latest cyber threats. They shouldn't have to know about the new accessibility standards. They should just sort of be able to, work with someone like a provider like Schoolzine and say, hey, just sort out this tech stuff, this digital engagement stuff with your platform. We can do it mostly ourselves, but we need to be able to call you if someone goes away, goes on mat leave and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's a core part of what we do. And I think it was a shock for me coming in from the corporate world. I've worked for a few like ASX listed businesses in my career, and seeing how schools operate. At first glance, it's like, this is just chaos. And then as you talk to customers, you realize that you're busy educating. You're not here to, like I said, make a profit for shareholders or to R&D, a scientific cure. You're here to help, your students sort of graduate and achieve. So let us support you. And then that's when it all kind of clicked to me in my first few weeks of the role here. It's that, schools are a very unique environment. And if you don't acknowledge that uniqueness and work with it and celebrate it and encourage it, then you're probably in the wrong industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the realization, isn't it, that especially for smaller remote schools, not only teachers but school staff, front of house staff, essentially the reception, the front office, they wear so many different hats. And it wasn't that long ago where I was on the phone providing consulting services for a lady who was only able to spare a little bit of time for me in the afternoon because she had to go fire up the mower from the maintenance shed to get ready for the school sports carnival and mark the lines next day. So it is all encompassing, isn't it?
I love that story. It's yeah, no, the people in rural Australia are amazing. Like I've had similar things. We've had people on phones where there's been a snake spotted in a demountable or something, and they had to deal with that. We've these people serve these catch-all roles, and you've got to respect and appreciate that. Anyone doing consulting or working with schools has to realize that there could be a kid vomiting in a bucket next to the person you're talking to about their newsletter.
Yeah.
It's just the reality, and you're not ringing a head office on, Brisbane River in the CBD here. Yeah, like you're not dealing with someone who's got peace and quiet. You're talking to principals and you can hear the bell go and then you can hear recess, and it's just deafening as all the kids run out of class, and you've kind of got to sit there and look at the principals you're working with on their website or on their newsletter and just wait for a bit of everyone to get outside and disperse and then resume the conversation. So it is an amazing environment, and I have so much respect coming out as an adult and working with schools after 20 years or so since I left school, and it's just been eye-opening and inspiring.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think inspiring is the word exactly. I think that's for sure. Now, we highlighted before the concerning literacy statistic coming out from the Australian government. Are you able to elaborate how you're working with schools to tackle this? Because you've definitely highlighted the fact that it's like translation and things associated with that, but it does indeed go deeper, doesn't it?
Yeah, 100%. It For us, we're not a huge conglomerate like Microsoft or Facebook, so investing into tech and investing into areas is something we do a lot of research in. It's to establish a need, but it's also to be a leader in the space. So I think researching and understanding the environment, a lot goes into it, and we've got some amazing partners that head of parent organizations and things like that. I won't name drop in case they don't want to be associated. but we work with these people and call these people and we say what are parents and guardians and caretakers, what challenges are they facing? And there's plenty of evangelical parent associations around, be it Catholic parent associations or in the public sector, who are evangelical about Schoolzine because we actually talk to them and listen to them. And so I can't fully take credit and say that I discovered this, because I kind of, it happened by talking to people. And as we pulled the threads together, we realized that there's this like big literacy gap, and that literacy gap is something I've been exposed to, firsthand a few times. I've worked in the community software space before and known how important translation is. Like you might have an Aboriginal community where, they're speaking English as their third or fourth or fifth language, and you're trying to engage those parents to help that student with their learning. And so it's a challenge that schools have. And the newsletter and putting photos and things like that in the newsletter, they transcend language. And so we encourage that. But we also want to do what we can to build tools to help these people read school communications and websites and newsletters. So ultimately, once this tool is built, and you'll see publicity about it come out as we build it, but it's going to do this. When you save a newsletter, AI is going to create a low literacy simplified version. It's going to create a version for every language that it can. And then it's going to create an audio synthesizer in each language that reads the newsletter out to you. A lot of languages and a lot of literacy and a lot of vision problems, it's because they've only got one medium to read, and that is like via eyesight, via a device. Being able to hear through a different medium opens up a new world of accessibility and comprehension. A lot of people with low literacy, you can talk to them and you won't, they're not stupid, they're not dumb, they're just something's happened. They might have dyslexia, they might
Yeah.
have had a hard, time at school, whatever, but they're still intelligent people. So you can talk and explain what's happening at school to them. So if we create this tool, essentially it's going to be read out to them, it's going to be in their own language, and then to top it all off, like maybe I'm too ambitious, I don't know, this, because this is the engineer in me being like, I want to solve this not for 98% or not for 99% of people, for 100% of people.
Absolutely.
Is I'm reaching out to language preservation societies so I can get these really rare languages who, they might only be spoken by 10,000 people in, remote islands and in like, Tagai and things like that, and get these languages into the AI as well. And the way that we do that, and the way that there's a language preservation aspect to it, is that we work with schools to get people in the community to log in that speak English, and maybe they speak two or three other languages, and help us translate it. And then we feed that in, we build a data set of the two languages, and then we've actually started inadvertently doing language preservation through a school newsletter. So there's this extra dimension to it all, which I think for us is like a greater purpose. If we can do everything we do with helping schools engage community, but on top of that, create maybe one of the first or one of the most expansive digital libraries of an extinct or endangered language. I won't say extinct language because that might be a bit hard, but an endangered language, then, like we're helping conserve their culture and things like that. So that's my end game. I'm gonna try and hold myself to it, because it is a tough task, and it's tough both from a technical perspective but also from a cultural perspective, because I have to work with a really busy school and say, hey, can you find someone in the community for me to go out that is really good at English but really also good at the local languages that are spoken in not only that language and that dialogue, and then rewrite the newsletter for me and translate it. and yeah, and so I'm gonna have to turn the charm on a little bit, but
Absolutely.
that's our goal. And I think if you don't aim for the stars, like what are you doing? Like, you may as well have a punt. At the very least, we're gonna include a lot more people having tried this, and if we can get to where I want to go with this project, it's gonna be, I dare say, like a world first type thing.
Absolutely.
Low key, like.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there is nothing about this, Dan, that is paint by numbers, is it?
No, and that's the thing. We're not copying someone to make a buck.
No.
We're talking to people, and we're taking those initial risks when they highlight these problems to us. And we're taking the risk to do the R&D for something that may or may not work. And we're taking that risk of changing our platform that a lot of users, use. We produce 4 million newsletters a year. And
Wow.
It's like 4.2. Like, I'm going to get shot by my GM for saying that number. It was well over 4, and it goes up every year. So we have this platform that's got enormous use, and we've got people who know the platform better than I do in our user base. And so, disrupting that, changing that, adding onto that, and making those calls based on the feedback we get from our users, from parent associations, from parents, from teachers, from administrators, rolling that all into a digital roadmap and choosing where to invest is really important. And you can't be a leader in the industry waiting for someone else to do it to make sure it's safe to then go and suddenly decide to be ambitious, you know. And I think the ambition, it comes from a right place. As long as it comes from, I'm ambitious to serve this community and include people and like get schools to wrap their arms around community and bring them in with our tool, then, you know, that's a good ambition to have, and that's going to help us get out of bed every morning and achieve it.
Absolutely. Now, speaking about getting out of bed in the morning, me asking this question may make you regret this, I'm not sure, but it's almost unfair to ask you this and be able to get a definitive answer, and it would be the same for anyone that I would ask this question to. Do you see AI as an enabler or a challenge when it comes to how schools communicate to their communities?
It's an enabler if it's used in the right way. But this is something that's very philosophical in tech. And they make us do ethics class in business school, and they make us do ethics class in engineering school, because we can do and build all sorts of weird and wonderful things that have different impacts in society. So it's something that I think about a lot in a lot of different regards. It comes down to how it's commercialized and how it's used. Right now, ChatGPT, the narrative that's out there, it's peddled as this amazing machine that you can talk to, and it just goes off and does a lot of this stuff. But at the same time, in a way, AI is almost just like a chat interface to the internet, a bit like how Google searches it. ChatGPT is how you talk to it. And so it's only going to be as powerful and as good as the internet as its collective whole. So every negative comment on Reddit, every negative comment on 4chan that formed part of the training and part of the machine learning data set that helped create these AI models, that's in its ethos and in its core. So in a way, we're dealing with like another iteration of the internet. And the internet is a spectrum from, you know, smutty, terrible, awful hate speech all the way to intellectual enlightenment, you know, things like Wikipedia and, you know, all the good things that are part of society. So we've almost got this spectrum of information that humanity's produced in the last sort of 20, 30 years, and we've rolled that up and trained AIs on it. And so you can get a response anywhere in that spectrum, and the AI is going to try to give you the response that you want. You know, its motivation is, how do I get off the phone with Alex? Or because I just want him to go away to save my tokens, to save my CPU, to save my power. So Alex, if you ask the AI, hey, you know, what color shirt should I wear today? Like, it doesn't care. It hasn't got a stake, but it wants to be correct. So it might say, you know, males of this age group look great in purple or whatever. So
yeah,
if you don't understand those mechanics of how it works, and you add that pinch of salt when you're using it, it's a disabler, like 100%. You will be led down a garden path. You will, it's almost like it'll gaslight you into being right or gaslight you into being wrong. And it's going to do the same with students if they're not taught how to use it correctly as well, I think. Like, I think that they need to be equipped with the tools and the ability to reason and say, nah, that's BS, a bit like how we teach them with how to act on the internet at the moment. So yeah. So I think it's a roundabout way of answering the question, but I think unless you really, really know what you're doing and you're working with experts on it, it's probably not going to be an enabler for some time. Yeah.
No, look, that's an intensely interesting answer, and I thank you very much for that, Dan. I think that's really, really good, and that's again going to resonate with a lot of people, because I remember going through school as a student, and sort of the advent of Wikipedia and things like that. That sort of tier one response from a teacher was like, well, just don't copy stuff off Wikipedia because it's like user contributed and everything like that. And you get into the discussions about references and things like that. And I think there is definitely pitfalls, and you use the word gaslight, and I think that's very, very, very much correct, where if you're not careful or aware or have a basic understanding at least of how different AI is answering a simple one-to-one question, you more often than not will be gaslit down a path where the responses that you get may condition the way that you think about what you've just asked, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. And look, like if I had to give 2 or 3 really good use cases for AI at the moment, treat it as a colleague who you're not really good friends with. So hopefully you don't have too many of those. But
Yeah.
and say if we weren't really good friends and I was trying to tell you something, you would have a level of cynicism in you, based on the level of rapport that we had, and you would apply that cynicism naturally to me because I'm a fallible human. I think when people deal with AI, they don't have that barometer of rapport and cynicism, and they at the same time they think that AI is all knowing, and so the stock that someone would put in an AI response versus say a coworker that they weren't too keen on, they're almost always going to pick the AI, even if the AI is wrong, and even if that person that you're not a huge fan of has got 10, 20, 30 years experience, there's that natural bias sort of kicks in that where the AI's response is perfectly formatted. It sounds really smart. I don't have any reason to dislike it because it didn't eat my lunch that time, or
Yeah.
eat a stinky salmon lunch or something with
Yeah,
whatever.
that's right.
So
And that's,
yeah,
like when you start entering very human factors such as like ego and past experiences and things like that, it's just almost easier, isn't it, to start whacking in those artificial degrees of separation by asking or engaging with an AI to get something done, to get a quick answer, to try and get a quick graphic done, rather than work with perhaps an artist that you may not get along with, but the company has had a contract with. Like, it's all those interesting in and out dynamics, isn't it, that can certainly colour this whole spectrum of getting from A to B.
oh, definitely. And I mean, we've manufactured complex working environments with people over many, many years. So, in a traditional corporation where you do have friction, the graphic designer might not like the product person, for example. That friction can sometimes be good because the graphic designer is pushing back on the product designer, or vice versa. They're challenging each other, hopefully in a productive way that elevates what they produce. But like I said, the AI wants to get you off the phone. It wants to conserve its AI credits and its CPU cycles. So it's going to just, it doesn't have a stake in what you're doing, essentially, like it can't. So it's got a stake to be correct because that's how machine learning works. It's got a stake because, and it's incentivized to give you the right result, but it doesn't care if you wear the wrong colored shirt, or if you produce the wrong graphic, or if you write the wrong email to a colleague. So that's the important take home, is that it is alien in a sense that it has no humanity and empathy and compassion for you and your situation. It's just telling you and acting really helpful. And when the chat interfaces to it are a lot different to the APIs that access it as well. And that's probably an important delineation to make. So, I've been a software engineer for 20 years. I both use the interface, but I also have been writing code to talk to it and fine tuning some of the parameters that aren't accessible through the chat window. So when I'm using it to say translate newsletters and things like that, I'm using it in a completely different way. And so I think people get that confused a little bit as well, in that some they might read an article that says this business just sacked all their software engineers or all their salespeople because they're using AI, and they're using it in a very different sense to how you or I might go to ChatGPT to ask, what species of frog is native to Cairns or something like that. So the people who are using it well are very highly trained and have computer science or engineering backgrounds. And then I think there's a middle ground where people are halfway between that chat interface and that API, like they're using really well-crafted prompts to help limit the response or force it to be more thorough or force it to do something they want to do. And then there's the punters, the entry level people who are like, what color shirt should I wear? Or what do you think of this? And they're probably the most susceptible to get the wonkier answers. So yeah, like I think if people are at that entry level and they start to try and do things that are quite advanced, they're going to get tricked up really, really quickly. And that's sort of the danger, I think.
Absolutely. Now, for those watching as either teachers or school staff or parents, guardians, are you able just to quickly touch on what API is and how important it is to actually, and how it essentially defines the rules of accessing, in this case, like an AI like ChatGPT, and how important an API is, because I'm sure that those who are working with either business packages and finance packages and things like that in schools, they would have seen the words or letters API dotted around. But are you able just to quickly highlight essentially what an API is and why it is a main driver towards getting things done for software?
Yeah, thanks, Alex. I kind of need a little shock collar every time I use an API acronym. It puzzles me. I try to wean myself off them, but look, I think API, the best way to think of it is it's a way that a programmer can talk from one application to another. And so the set of tools that a program offers you, or an application offers you through like a web browser, is a subset of the API, which are tools that are available to a developer to use it. And so they bypass the internet, the interface and the graphics of the application, and they're accessing the engine of the application, and they're doing things. A great analogy would be Google Maps. We've all got Google Maps on our phone, but Google Maps also has an API. So as a programmer, I can produce something with their engine, and I can make, say, a map of all the best Pokemon stops for Pokemon Go or something like that through my own application, which is using Google via this API. So it's like working with the bare metal in a way, rather than sort of going through the standard user interface. And when we say API in the context of AI, we're really under the hood of that thing, reading its prompts, like telling it, hey, don't just try to get off the phone with me. And when you use it, not to go into too much tech detail, you can through an API, you can ask ChatGPT a question and you can tell it how many tokens to spend on it. So that's how much CPU and power, and that costs you money, right? So you can't just go 10,000 tokens because your account's just going to go whoosh.
That's right.
So yeah, with great power comes great responsibility, but you can. And when I first started experimenting with it, probably like 18 months ago, I was being really cheap and giving it like 100 tokens, which isn't very many. And it started just spamming Cantonese text out to me mid-response. So like, so I was like, okay, well, I've tested a bound there. So, as an example, the API is quite challenging to navigate as an engineer, and that's where we really get under the hood. And your average person will probably never really be exposed to that. But I hope that answers it in a slightly clear way.
No, that's right. I'm sure that a lot of people's ears would have pricked up when they heard Pokemon Go and things like that. So I'm sure that either teachers, school administrators, or parents would have had kids in the other room go, Pokemon Go. Might be leaning around the corner now, so fantastic. Now, winding it back to you yourself now, motivation as a CEO can come from many different sources. Can you highlight to me how you see the connection between community engagement and the educational outcomes for students?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's so easy to wake up day to day and just slip into routine and forget those core reasons why. So I'm glad you asked. Look, for me, it's about, I think schools are weirdly emotive because almost everyone you deal with has been to school at some point in time. And I remember riding home on my bike with a crumpled up piece of paper in my backpack, and I wasn't as eloquent as a kid as I am now. I'm not neurotypical, so I wasn't a great communicator as a kid, and especially not as a teenager. And there was a lot going on in my head, in my heart of what was happening at school, which a crumpled up piece of paper in my bag couldn't articulate. And that's, a anything from a newsletter to a report card or whatever. Um, Digital tools have evolved a lot since I've been at school, so there's no reason that has to stay the same way. Like that we shouldn't have kids going home having trouble talking to their parents, having trouble explaining that there's a fate, having trouble remembering dates, having trouble articulating how much pride they felt to win an award or how proud they felt of their school to, see an athletics carnival. So, if Schoolzine can play a role in supporting schools and students and parents in that endeavor and connect them, then, my own journey from where I was and some of the frustrations I had at school, and I think a lot of people would have had similar experiences to me back in the roaring 90s. If I can somehow bridge that gap and improve it and leave a bit of a legacy and make everything a better place, then that's motivation for me. And that motivation's been true for me before Schoolzine, wanting to, help war affected children, wanting to help communities in roles prior to that. So, there's definitely a feel good, warm, fuzzy piece of what Schoolzine does. And I've worked for big bad lottery companies before and stuff like that, and you don't get the same warm, fuzzy feeling that you get working, with schools and in the community. And look, I've tried teaching. I backpacked around Cambodia and taught English. I'm rubbish at it. Do not ever think that I'm a good teacher. I have a lot of respect for it because I know how hard it is. And if I can't teach, the best thing I can do is apply my tech knowledge to help communities and help student outcomes in that way.
Fantastic. And I think there would be many, many schools that utilise Schoolzine as a service would definitely support you in that mindset, that's for sure. So no, that's fantastic. And I guess going on from that, is being a voice and advocating for those who may struggle to have one, a voice that is, a core value for both yourself and Schoolzine, do you think?
I think so, yeah. I think for a long time we've realised that we wanted to move the needle outside of creating a quick buck, and there's a lot of easier industries to work in outside of schools where you can build a piece of software and make money. There's hundreds of different industries and markets. When you work with schools, like we've discussed, they're really busy. They're busy educating. They don't necessarily want to have to deal with 100 consultants and software vendors. So, if you're in this industry, you have to be in it for more reasons than just building tech and charging money for it. And that's why Schoolzine, I think, has the support and the customer success side of the business so much ingrained into its culture. and the pieces of information around translation and accessibility and inclusiveness, that's something that some schools get it and they are immediately facing that challenge. And if you think about multicultural cities in around Australia, those cities with a lot of multicultural people where English is a second, third, or fourth language, those people understand the challenges that we're solving straight away, whereas not all schools have those challenges. Not all those schools think about accessibility until they actually have a disabled parent or guardian walk in through their head office. Someone who's blind or low vision who needs communications read out to them. So we're inspired by being at the forefront of solving that problem. And then schools are either going to be cheering us on and be like, wow, Schoolzine is crushing it, or they're going to be completely oblivious to it and they're going to say, oh, that's a nice thing to have, until the day that they connect it and the story connects in their minds and they're like, oh wow, like even this parent who's come in who's got intellectual disability and needs simplified language, that'll be the day that they really see what we strive for every day. So it's those moments that I think, when in one instance someone at a school, a busy educator, can experience a problem and see the solution is already in place, that's what gets me out of bed in the morning, and that's what excites us at Schoolzine, is that we've just solved it for them. They can get back to education, and they've already got a best of breed thing that's just sorting out their community engagement for them and including everyone. And so if we achieve that, then I'm a happy camper.
Oh, fantastic. Now, looking back at your own educational journey, what would you consider a few major milestones from previous roles that have had a great impact not only on you and others? And I know that we covered the Ukraine aspect earlier, which again could be its own Schoolyard Cast episode on itself, that's for sure. But are you able to tell me, in terms of these milestones, how they've contributed to you and how it relates to your passion at Schoolzine?
Yeah, look, I've had an interesting career, and I think that software engineering and MBAs don't always go together. I've only met one other person who's got the same kind of rap sheet in terms of tertiary education. So call it a rap sheet because of the HECS that comes with it. But so it's an interesting scenario. I think for me, starting in software engineering, it was about solving problems, and I was really drawn and passionate about solving problems in tech through engineering. And that's what it is in essence. I started getting a bit frustrated with problems that were outside of engineering, and those frustrations are things like bad leaders or decisions that I thought were bad. And a breaking point for me as a software engineer who was a pretty good coder and great at solving problems, I was working for a lottery company, and I spent a week essentially making it easier for people on Internet Explorer 7 to buy lottery tickets. And then I pulled the thread, and then I kind of realized that those people were like pensioners or, older people, and the marketing people were talking about the demographics. And I'm like, I just sort of sat there with a beer on a Friday and thought, I've just spent a week after all this tertiary training of engineering to come up with this incredibly innovative solution to get a pensioner to buy more lottery tickets that they're probably never going to win the lottery.
Yeah.
And I kind of was like, what's going on? And I was in line for a promotion, like I was in line for a team leadership role. I was pretty good at talking to stakeholders, and my wife and I were thinking about buying a house at the time as well and putting down roots, and kind of just sold everything and went backpacking in Cambodia for 18 months.
Wow.
So yeah, we'd never really been overseas before, and we were like, we're too young to jump into this mortgage thing, and we lived in Thailand for 6 months, and we lived at an orphanage, and we tutored students in English. This is how I know I'm a bad teacher. Um, and then we moved over to Cambodia and we lived there. So a couple of years, helping with charities, and I started running to finance it all. I was running businesses back here in Australia, and that sort of gave me that taste and that intro to running businesses and solving business problems more so than engineering problems. And when I came back from the whirlwind tour of Southeast Asia, we came back and we had the culture shock and all that stuff that comes with it. But I pretty much decided to start my MBA because I was just starting to really fall in love with the world of business. So, that, as negative as that experience was, making that lottery tickets form for, and realizing I didn't want to be in the gambling industry. It's a low moment, but it actually awakened something in me to sort of try and do things that were as ethical as possible in my career. And a lot of the career choices I made after that exposed me to problems that I was oblivious to. Because, let's face it, I'm a privileged guy. Like, I've got a lot of privilege here in Australia. I'm not a minority. I'm not suffering from any kind of disability that stops me from reading. So this whole hidden world of the underdog, and I guess people who needed help and needed extra support that I was oblivious to, I was exposed to more and more of this through these different roles. And that's how I learned about the importance of building accessibility into software, and realizing, hey, not everyone speaks English. And I think they're lessons that everyone learns in their 20s and 30s as they kind of get out of that, hey, I'm 18, I'm going to party phase, and then they grow up. So I think it's a bit of a part of growing up and part of my career journey. But where I landed was essentially, if I wake up in the morning and start applying myself to something, like, yeah, I definitely need to pay the mortgage, but at the same time, I want that warm, fuzzy feeling that comes with actually helping people and doing something that's right. So I hope that it's a bit of an abstract way to answer the question, but yeah, that's more or less it in a nutshell.
No, look, again, it's fantastic that you're spending time here on the Schoolyard Cast and sharing these stories, because, again, I'm sure that they will resonate with a lot of people who have an inkling or a feeling, or can look straight in onto the screen and go, I know exactly what Dan is talking about. I know what Dan is feeling. So people who are, either at the start or at the very end of this mindset, because essentially at the end of the day, it's a call to action, isn't it? And we all get a call to action through different methods and through different stimulus, don't we?
100%. And yeah, it's reading the statistics about literacy and knowing how big of a problem literacy is across the world and in Australia. And then, also at the same time, seeing that there's large corporates out there that don't meet the same inclusivity and accessibility levels that we hit at Schoolzine. We punch way above our weight in that respect. And we're constantly, working with people to try to invest and make things better. And, the Tasmanian government was one rollout we did as a call to action, and they were the ones driving it as fast as we were. So shout out to Tassie, but they were amazingly on the front foot about accessibility. And it's great when you're sitting at the table with someone who has also had that same call to action and that same inspiration and that same resolve. And every year we talk to more and more people who are on board, and like they see that extra piece of value around accessibility and translation that's just so critical to community engagement. So yeah, look, if I'm allowed to leave a message, it's like, I'm keen for a coffee, beer, chat, lunch, Teams, whatever, to talk about it. because I love to hear people's ideas and people's feelings and thoughts about it. Because yeah, it's my call to action, and it's good to stick with like-minded people. So
Fantastic, and it's a real special energy, isn't it, when you're able to sit around either a table or across a coffee table, meeting table, conference table, Teams, Zoom, anything like that. When you feel that special sort of synergy, you just feed off each other, and it is a special thing, that's for sure. And it doesn't even have to be in the realm of like being a professional in an office. It could be sport, it can be volunteer work, it can be anything like that. As soon as and it can be sometimes difficult, put yourself in a place where you can surround yourself with like-minded people who are all positive and all pointing towards the same direction. That level of synergy, it can certainly do more than just get you out of bed in the morning, that's for sure. Yeah. So with understanding that tools along with AI, along with general improvements are coming through this year, can you tell me what else is on the horizon for Schoolzine?
well, I'm cutting out a little bit here.
Oh, okay.
Can you still hear me?
Yep, I can hear you now.
Okay, we're back.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, the horizon for Schoolzine, like, we're very much focused on the accessibility and translation aspects. The other thing, we've been working with a partner called School TV who do curated content, and they're very much in line with the organic is the new authentic is the new organic. You know, that they're producing curated content to help busy educators, and that's a one button click if you're a Schoolzine customer to add School TV's content into the newsletter. So they might do a video about how parents can talk to kids about vaping, you know, things like that. And so we're looking to create and foster partnerships where we bring that curated content into the newsletter much easier. And this is as a reaction in a way. It's something we did and started before the AI wave took off, but it's something we're sort of doubling down on, is that we don't want a feature where an admin person can say, generate me a newsletter and just put noise out to parents. We want the newsletter to be a value piece, and our partners that are producing really good content, they plug into our systems, but also, like with a lot of our customers who might be, say, a diocese head office, having their messages accessible to schools, because they've often got people who can communicate messages. They might write messages on faith, they might write messages on how to talk to kids about an issue, you know, so they can build an arsenal of authentic content that can go into newsletters as well. And so where we really want to land with it is that when you go to open up a new newsletter, you'll have the training and the knowledge and the upskilling from Schoolzine about adding text, images, video that we love. But you'll also have this library of information, be it from a Schoolzine partner, be it from a head diocese, be it from a state education department, and you'll be able to put that information into the newsletter. And like I said, it sounds like a simple concept, but we publish for, you know, over 4 million newsletters a year. So introducing that change in a way that doesn't freak people out is, you know, core to that. So we can't move too quick with it, but that's the direction we're heading, because we don't want to fall. And I think a lot of companies are knee jerking, and you see the little magic diamonds icon to AIify everything. I think a lot of companies, especially tech companies, are knee jerking, and they're saying, I need to throw AI into my product. And they immediately go to, I can plug this thing in that improves a user's writing and put it in there.
Yeah.
We stopped to pause a little bit before we had that knee jerk, and we were like, hey, yeah, AI is a massive unlock for translation and accessibility. Like, let's apply it there in a way that doesn't jeopardize or compromise the integrity of our product. And then let's look at the ramifications of AI across the industry. And we've seen how much fluff gets put out from AI. So we want to be the counter to that. We want to be the organic against all the mass produced crap that's behind us in the background and say, hey, an actual educational professional teacher has written this article for you about how to talk to your kids about their subjects to show interest because it's going to impact their outcomes.
Yeah.
You know, the geology teachers talking about, hey, today we talked about volcanic rocks. Talk to your child about volcanic rocks and ask them what they learn. You know, if we stick to our guns and believe in the people who are authoring content on our platform, we're going to outshine the stuff that's coming from AI, and we're going to continue to build these like really strong, meaningful communities. So we're doubling down on that, and we're working on ways to make it easier to pull that content together, because we know it is another thing that educators have to do on top of their workload. So yeah, if I can get to the end of say 2026 and I've got my AI language preservation big high vision audacious goal, and then at the same time if I can get some really easy ways to get content library into newsletters for our users, and they're the organic in the world of the manufactured, then I'll be really, really happy. So that's my goal in a nutshell.
Fantastic. And yeah, thank you very much for sharing that, Dan. I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of people who are obviously clients of Schoolzine, but those who are going to be clients of Schoolzine, especially after they see this chat, that's for sure. Now, with around 150 schools in the Pacific Islands having websites supported by Schoolzine in an exciting project, there's a very real opportunity for funding partners to come on board and help grow both the project and web presence of these schools, isn't there?
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, that's another example of us being really ambitious and maybe thinking with our hearts as much as our heads to be inclusive and include people. And I've talked about accessibility, and I've talked about language translation, but the other big factor both here in Australia, but more so in the Pacific Islands, is the digital divide. And if you know about the digital divide, you'll know that it's essentially the gap in knowledge, or the gap in acquiring technology like phones and laptops, and then the knowledge to use them to access information. And that in a nutshell is the digital divide. So our website project started a few years ago, and it started before I came on actually as a full-time CEO. And it's essentially, we've got about 150 across the Solomons, Fiji, countries that might only have 2 schools or 3 schools on the whole island, and speak their own language. So it's been an enormous undertaking. The thing people probably don't realize about websites, it's not a one-click button solution. We actually need images, content from those people, and we're battling with the digital divide. And so we're working with people who they might only get internet when they drive into town, which is 2 hours away, and they only go on Sundays for church. Yep. And then they might check their emails. So you're working in a different culture with different levels of tech proficiency to get them websites. However, once we get the websites there, they get a lot of traffic and a lot of interest and a lot of use. And where I'm sort of putting effort in is to talk both with corporate partners and with not-for-profits, because it's for us, once we've got the website and once we've got interest and we've done all that hard work to produce this kind of digital hub for the school, and school and community are a key part of the communities over there. We can easily put things like books on it. And lucky, this started before COVID, because we put COVID information on all the websites for these people so that they could see the information about washing hands and all that sort of stuff and help spread diseases. So we know how powerful it is to have a digital platform and be able to communicate so readily with parents and in communities and through the school website. So I'd love to partner with a not-for-profit and say put 100 free ebooks in their native language on those websites. Or I'd love to have a corporate sponsor, say like a telecom company, help us bridge the digital divide and make sure that everyone's got a affordable phone or a free phone that they can access that website on. So it's a project that's been bubbling away at Schoolzine for a few years, and it's an extension of that inclusivity to our neighbours, and it's like operating on hard mode, because we've talked about how busy schools are here in Australia, but we're used to the culture, we're used to, the level of tech proficiency with schools, and working overseas in those environments is extra challenging. And the real dream and the real wish that I have is for a big company to sort of support us, or a not-for-profit to support us and get boots on the ground to actually create a circular economy over there and help and do a train the trainer model, so we can actually train Fijian web developers, Fijian, Solomon Island web developers to manage school websites and get them a foot in the door for, anything from writing code to updating content to taking good pictures, things that we kind of take for granted with our high level of digital and tech literacy. We could really start helping lift that in those countries and using school websites as a medium to do that. So I still haven't had much luck. I've been knocking on doors for a couple of years, of years. But it's like I said, we lose money on it. Like we lose cash every year. We lose, I guess, time as well, with our support staff having to sort of send 16 emails to get one image to put on the website, kind of thing. So there's way more efficient ways to do it. And yeah, look, I think if you're uniquely positioned to solve the problem, you have to give it a go. And sometimes you have to jump in first before, a corporate sponsor's going to have the vision and say, oh, wow, these guys actually spotted and started solving this really significant problem. Let's help. And so we're not afraid to take those big leaps into the unknown. Like, we're not jeopardizing our cool business doing it. It's not that expensive, but it would be there's some companies I can think of, I won't name and shame, with very deep pockets doing activities over there that could definitely throw some support our way that would help our cause.
Fantastic. Well, anyone with the power of the pen watching this, it doesn't matter if it's watching it on day of release or weeks or months after the initial publication of this episode, I would certainly recommend anyone to, even if you don't have the power of the pen, to speak to those who do within your organisation, to reach out to Dan. And speaking of which, Dan, what would be the best way for people to reach out and keep up to date with you?
LinkedIn is my only real social platform. I'm not a huge X fan with the recent developments there, or it used to be called Twitter. Or you can just email. We're not so big that you can't get to the CEO through the support desk. So say, hey, if you're a customer and you want to talk or you want to give feedback, feel free to drop it through our regular support channels. Test out how good and switched on our staff are and how traversable Schoolzine is as a business, and you'll probably see that I respond, within a couple of days of any kind of message on those two platforms.
Fantastic. Well, Dan Dawson, thank you for being on the Schoolyard Cast.
My pleasure. Thanks very much for having me.
No worries at all. And I think, this won't be the last time that we'll be able to bring you on for a chat, because there's lots of interesting aspects to be able to dig into, not only your work in Ukraine, but AI and APIs and things like that. So I think this won't be the last that we see of you.
It'll be my pleasure to rejoin again. Whatever you need, mate. Whatever you need.
Fantastic, Dan. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alex. Cheers, mate.